The traditional world focused on human vices and virtues. Vices being bad qualities, virtues meaning good qualities. So vices were things like gluttony or overeating or desiring too many things or laziness and so on. And virtues were things like wisdom and knowledge and being grateful and things like that. After a long journey of studying mental illnesses and abnormal behavior and emotional difficulties, psychologists have returned to looking at human virtues or good qualities. Recently, when I say recently, I mean in the last 2 or 3 decades, Martin Seligman and associates collected a large number of data from all over the world. And this data looked at universal human virtues. What are these virtues that almost all cultures agree upon are desirable human traits? So the first virtue was knowledge and wisdom. It's interesting that almost every society in the world rates knowledge and wisdom as one of the most important human virtues or the most important human qualities. Even though there are many societies in the third world where illiteracy is common, even in these societies, people value knowledge and knowledgeable people. So many of these virtues contain different qualities that group together to form these virtues. For instance, the virtue of knowledge and wisdom contains a quality called love of learning. So people who are considered knowledgeable or wise generally tend to have a love of learning. And that is why many people say that even if your child does not study regularly, or even if they don't have the discipline to do their homework, or even if they're not memorizing their times tables or what have you, if we succeed in creating a love of learning, a love of reading about new things, a love of inquiry, asking questions, we will have succeeded. Love of learning is a quality that I think is a very important part of the virtue of knowledge and wisdom. Similarly, if we look at the second most important virtue, that is courage. Now, this is very interesting because wisdom or knowledge imparts certain skills. It imparts different ways of looking at the world. It imparts different ways of understanding the world. But now what is needed is that with that knowledge and wisdom, we should have the courage to speak our mind. We should have the courage to implement the things that are required because we have the knowledge, because we have the wisdom. So if we only have this knowledge and wisdom and do not have the courage to speak out and do not have the courage to suggest that things change according to this knowledge and wisdom, then this knowledge and wisdom becomes useless for the most part. There are many sayings about people who have knowledge but do not have courage to act. They are considered hypocrites. So in most traditions, people who don't have knowledge are not considered as bad as people who have knowledge but do not implement that knowledge due to cowardice. Third most important virtue is humanity. So when you have wisdom and knowledge, and when you have the courage to implement your ideas, you also need to display kindness to others, love of other people, and a certain social intelligence as to how to deal with people. Because you can see that if you have knowledge and wisdom, and you have the courage to implement your ideas, you will need to work with other people to implement those ideas. So first, it makes practical sense to be able to understand other people. But in addition, this compassion and this love of other people is an essential quality, independent of courage and knowledge and wisdom, which has to be there for a person to be considered kind, for a person to be considered a good person. If you're very knowledgeable and if you're very courageous, but if you do not respect other people, if you do not love your family, your neighbors, or anybody else that comes in contact with you, or humanity in general, there is not much value that will be placed on how knowledgeable you are. The fourth most important virtue is justice. How is justice important and why? If you look at human history, people have fought wars because they have felt unfairly treated, because they have felt that somebody else is being preferred over them for one reason or another. If they feel that laws are being implemented not fairly, if one person abuses the rights of the others. So here we see that justice, which includes the idea of fairness, which includes the idea of leadership, team building, providing accurate judgment in situations, and so on, is another very important virtue, especially when dealing with other people. So this is a virtue that concerns primarily dealing with other people. The next virtue is temperance. It is translated in Arabic as i'tidal, a word that is also commonly understood in Urdu. Moderation, certain carefulness, a certain vigilance, a certain sobriety and stability is implied. Certain mindfulness is implied by temperance. People who do things in moderation, people who do things carefully, considering everything, not jumping the gun, not rushing into things impulsively. So these are considered people who are temperate. So temperance is another very important virtue across the globe. And finally, we have the virtue of transcendence. What does transcendence mean? It's a difficult word, so let me explain. Transcendence literally means something that is above other things. So for instance, you're living in this world, you're gaining knowledge, you're being brave, you're being kind to others, you're being very just, and you are sober and moderate and temperate. Yet your personality is not complete unless you believe in something higher, unless you believe in something spiritual, unless you are in contact with a higher being of some kind. You are not considered a complete individual. So transcendence includes phenomena like humor. It includes phenomena like gratitude. People who are grateful to others and to God are considered more spiritual or more transcendent. And your link with God, spirituality, is an important part of transcendence. So these were the 6 virtues that are considered very important all over the world. There are tests available online as well as with psychology departments all over the world that would conduct these tests for people and help them understand what their strengths are and how they can develop strengths in areas where they might be weak.